The Galactic Council chambers had never witnessed such terror. Ambassador Zethkar of the Valerian Republic clutched his ceremonial staff with all four of his trembling hands, his usually pristine blue scales now dulled with stress marks. Across the vast circular hall, representatives from hundreds of species sat in stunned silence, their various forms of communication reduced to fearful whispers and anxious clicks. The holographic display at the center showed the devastating aftermath. 3 entire star systems reduced to nothing but cosmic dust and radiation signatures. The Kethmori Deathworlders had struck again, and this time, they had completely obliterated the Nexarian defense fleet that had tried to stop them. Esteemed colleagues, Zethkar's voice cracked as he addressed the assembly. We can no longer pretend this is a manageable threat. The Kethmori have evolved beyond our worst nightmares. The Kethmori were unlike anything the galaxy had ever produced. Born on a world where the very air was toxic to most species, where gravity crushed bones like twigs, and where radiation storms could sterilize entire continents, they had become the perfect killing machines. Their exoskeletons could deflect plasma fire. Their internal biology processed toxins as nutrients, and their technology seemed to bend the laws of physics to their will. Council leader Thrix Anya, an ancient being whose crystalline form had overseen galactic peace for over 3 centuries, resonated with deep concern. The evacuation protocols are failing. Every time we establish a safe zone, they find us. Every defense we mount, they tear through like paper. The truth was becoming undeniable. In their 15-year rampage across the galaxy, the Kethmori had destroyed 47 civilizations completely. Not conquered, not subjugated, but utterly annihilated. They took no prisoners, accepted no surrender, and showed no mercy. They simply consumed everything in their path, growing stronger with each victory. Admiral Vexthal of the combined fleet stood slowly, his insectoid features grim. Our latest intelligence suggests they're not just expanding randomly. They're following a pattern, consuming species with specific genetic markers. We believe they're trying to evolve further to become even more dangerous. A shudder ran through the chamber. The idea that the Kethmori could become more powerful was beyond terrifying. The mathematical projections are clear, continued the Admiral. At their current rate of expansion and evolution, they will reach the core worlds within 2 standard years. When that happens, galactic civilization will end. The Velkari delegate, speaking through her translation device, posed the question everyone feared to ask. What about the Outer Rim territories? Surely some species there might have developed defenses we haven't considered. Zethkar pulled up another display, showing the galaxy's spiral arms. We've sent scouts to every known civilization beyond our borders. Most have already fallen. The few that remain are either too primitive to help or too terrified to engage. Then something unexpected happened. A junior communications officer, a young Altarian named Kailash, burst into the chamber. Such interruptions were unheard of in council proceedings, and security moved to restrain her immediately. Wait, Thrixania commanded. Let her speak. Kailash stepped forward, her breathing rapid with excitement and fear. Council leader, we've received a transmission. From Sector 7G beyond the neutral zone, a species we've never encountered before. The chamber fell silent. Sector 7G was considered a wasteland, filled with unstable stars and death worlds that no civilized species would ever colonize. Impossible, Admiral Vexthal stated. Our surveys of that region showed no signs of advanced civilization. That's just it, Admiral, Kailash continued. They're not from any world we've cataloged. They call themselves humans, and they claim they can help. Laughter erupted from several delegates. The idea that some unknown species from the galaxy's most hostile region could offer assistance against the Kethmori seemed absurd. What could primitives from a dead sector possibly offer us? Scoffed the Zinthari representative, but Thrixania silenced the chamber with a harmonic pulse. Play the transmission. The holographic display shifted, and suddenly they were looking at a being unlike any they had encountered. It stood upright on 2 legs, had pale skin mostly covered by some kind of uniform, and most startling of all, its eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost predatory. Greetings, Galactic Council, the human said in accented but clear standard. My name is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. We've been monitoring your situation with the Kethmori incursions, and we believe we can be of assistance. The human paused, and when it continued, there was something in its voice that made even the most skeptical delegates pay attention. We understand you've classified the Kethmori homeworld as a Class 12 death world, uninhabitable to galactic standard life. What you don't know is that Earth, our homeworld, rates as a Class 15 death world by your own measurements. We've spent our entire evolutionary history learning to survive on a world that makes the Kethmori homeworld look like a vacation resort. Shocked murmurs rippled through the chamber. Class 15 death worlds were considered theoretically impossible to support intelligent life. Captain Chen continued. Furthermore, our preliminary analysis of Kethmori technology and tactics suggests they've never encountered a species that fights the way we do. They've grown accustomed to overwhelming more peaceful civilizations. They've never faced a species that has been at war with itself for its entire recorded history. The human's expression grew harder, and something in those strange eyes made Zethkar feel a chill he had never experienced before. The Kethmori believe they are the apex predators of this galaxy. They're about to learn what it means to hunt something that hunts back. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in absolute silence. For long moments, no one spoke, no one moved. Finally, Thrixiania broke the silence. This human claims their world is more hostile than a Kethmori death world. If this is true, Admiral Vexthul finished quietly, then perhaps we haven't been thinking about this problem correctly. Perhaps we've been trying to fight Deathworlders with the tactics of civilized species. Zethkar found himself asking the question that would change everything. What if the only way to defeat monsters is to find bigger monsters? The council had been running from the Kethmori for 15 years. They had tried negotiation, tried hiding, tried every civilized response to an uncivilized threat. Nothing had worked. But now, from the darkest reaches of space came a species claiming they could fight fire with fire. The question was, were these humans saviors, or had the council just made contact with something even worse than what they were already fleeing from? As debates erupted across the chamber, one thing became clear. The galaxy was about to change forever. The human ship appeared in the Nexus system 3 days after the transmission, and its arrival sent shockwaves through the assembled council fleet. Admiral Vexthul stared at the tactical display in disbelief, his compound eyes focusing and refocusing as if the readings might change. "This cannot be correct," he muttered, mandibles clicking nervously. "Run the scans again." Lieutenant Koresh, his aide, double-checked the instruments with practiced efficiency. "Admiral, the readings are consistent. The human vessel measures only 800 meters in length, with a crew complement of approximately 3,000. By galactic standards, it's barely a frigate. Yet this tiny ship had somehow traversed the galaxy faster than any council vessel could manage. More disturbing were the energy signatures it was giving off. The humans were using technologies that council science couldn't identify. Powered by energy sources that shouldn't exist, sir, Koresh continued hesitantly. Their ship is broadcasting on frequencies our communication arrays can barely detect. The computational power required for such precise transmission control. The Admiral's antennae twitched with agitation. Every piece of data about these humans defied explanation. They came from a region of space that should have been uninhabitable, traveled in ships that operated on impossible principles, and now they were offering to fight an enemy that had crushed every military force in the galaxy. A chime indicated an incoming transmission request. On the main screen, Captain Chen appeared, her image crystal clear despite the distance. Behind her, the bridge of the human ship was visible, and Admiral Vexthul felt his breathing apparatus constrict in shock. The humans were not wearing environmental suits. They were operating in what appeared to be an atmosphere that would kill most galactic species within minutes. The gravity readings alone suggested they should be crushed flat, yet they moved with fluid grace that spoke of perfect adaptation to their environment. "Admiral Vexthul," Captain Chen said, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to resonate through the communication system. "Permission to come aboard your flagship? I believe a face-to-face meeting would be more productive." The Admiral's tactical training screamed warnings. Allowing unknown aliens aboard the fleet's command vessel violated every security protocol in existence, but desperation makes cowards of the wise and fools of the cautious. "Granted, Captain. However, I must warn you that our atmospheric requirements won't be a problem," Chen interrupted smoothly. "We've already analyzed your ship's environment. We'll adapt." The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Vexthul staring at the blank screen. Adapt to an alien atmosphere in minutes? The biological implications alone were staggering. 20 minutes later, the human shuttle docked with the flagship. Security Chief Mextar and his team waited in the docking bay, weapons powered but not drawn. When the airlock cycled open, what emerged defied every expectation they had formed. Captain Chen stepped out wearing only a simple breathing mask and a thin environmental suit that looked more like clothing than protective gear. She moved with the confident stride of a predator in its natural habitat, her strange eyes scanning the assembled aliens with analytical precision. "Atmospheric pressure is acceptable," she reported to her companion, a tall human male who carried what appeared to be a simple briefcase. "Gravity is actually comfortable, about 60% of Earth normal." Security Chief Mextar nearly dropped his weapon. 60%? The flagship operated at what was considered standard galactic gravity. If this was light to the humans, what kind of world had produced them? The delegation proceeded to the Admiral's ready room, where the senior staff had assembled. As Captain Chen took her seat, Admiral Vexthul noticed something that chilled him to his core. The human's movements were too fluid, too precise. She wasn't struggling with the lower gravity. She was restraining herself, consciously moving slowly enough not to alarm her hosts. "Before we begin," Chen said, placing a small device on the conference table, "I need you to understand something about human military doctrine. We don't fight wars to achieve political objectives or territorial gains. We fight wars to end them permanently." The device projected a holographic image of Earth, and the assembled aliens gasped collectively. The planet was a nightmare of extremes. Massive continents dominated by mountain ranges that reached impossible heights, oceans deeper than most worlds were wide, and weather systems that could devastate entire regions. Our homeworld taught us that survival requires constant adaptation and overwhelming response to threats, Chen continued. Every species we've encountered tries to minimize casualties and preserve infrastructure. We've learned that sometimes total destruction is the most merciful option. Ambassador Krelak from the Pacifist Union leaned forward nervously. "Captain, surely you don't advocate genocide?" Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes made the ambassador shrink back. "The Kethmori have committed genocide 47 times. They've declared war on all sentient life in this galaxy. By their own actions, they've established the rules of engagement." She activated another projection, this one showing human military units in action. The aliens watched in stunned silence as human soldiers operated in environments that would kill any other known species, using weapons that seemed to bend physics, employing tactics that prioritized speed and overwhelming force over preservation. "We've been fighting each other for over 10,000 years, Chen explained matter-of-factly. "We've perfected warfare to an art form. We know how to fight in space, underwater, underground, in toxic atmospheres and crushing gravity, in radiation that would sterilize most worlds. We know how to fight outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded." Dr. Yilthera, the Council's chief xenobiologist, spoke up with scientific curiosity overriding her fear. "Captain, the gravity on your world, the atmospheric composition, the radiation levels. How did your species survive the evolutionary process?" For the first time, Captain Chen smiled, and that expression was somehow more frightening than her serious demeanor had been. "Doctor, you're thinking about this backwards. We didn't survive despite our world's hostility. We survived because of it. Every disaster, every extinction event, every environmental catastrophe made us stronger. Natural selection didn't just favor the fittest among humans. It favored the most adaptable, the most resilient, the most capable of extreme violence when threatened." She stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the assembled council fleet. "Your ships are marvels of engineering, designed for exploration and peaceful contact. Our ships are weapons built by a species that has never known peace, designed to function in any environment and destroy anything that threatens our survival." Admiral Vexthul felt a growing sense of unease. "Captain, are you saying that humans have never achieved peace?" Chen turned back to face the assembled aliens, and in that moment, they all understood that they were in the presence of something far more dangerous than they had imagined. "Admiral, in human history we measure peace in years or decades. We measure wars in centuries. We've never had a generation that didn't know conflict. We've never had a century without major wars. We've built our entire civilization around the assumption that someone, somewhere, is trying to kill us." The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems. "But here's what you need to understand," Chen continued, her voice softening slightly. "We've also learned that the best way to protect what you love is to ensure that Anyone who threatens it regrets their decision so thoroughly that others never make the same mistake. She returned to her seat and looked directly at Admiral Vexthul. The Kethmori believe they're the most dangerous species in the galaxy because they've never met real competition. They're about to learn what happens when an unstoppable force meets an unmovable object. As the meeting continued, one thought echoed through every alien mind present. They had been so focused on surviving the Kethmori that they hadn't stopped to consider what kind of species could offer to save them. Now they were beginning to understand that their salvation might come at a price they hadn't anticipated. The first joint operation between human and galactic forces took place in the Meridian sector, where a small Kethmori scouting force had been harassing civilian evacuation convoys. Admiral Vexthul had insisted on observing the engagement personally, despite Captain Chen's warnings that human military operations tended to be more intense than galactic standards. The human battle group consisted of 5 ships, each one smaller than a standard Council destroyer, yet their energy signatures were off the charts. As they approached the combat zone, Admiral Vexthul noted with growing unease that the humans weren't following any recognizable tactical formation. "Captain Chen," he transmitted, "your ships appear to be operating independently. Don't you coordinate your movements?" Chen's response crackled through the communication system with what sounded like amusement. "Admiral, human warfare doctrine doesn't rely on rigid formations. Each ship captain is authorized to engage targets of opportunity using whatever methods they deem most effective. We call it controlled chaos." Before Admiral Vexthul could respond to that disturbing concept, the Kethmori force appeared on sensors. 3 massive dreadnoughts, each one capable of reducing a planet to molten slag, accompanied by a dozen smaller but equally deadly escort vessels. The alien ships immediately locked onto the approaching fleets and began their standard intimidation protocol, broadcasting the screams of their previous victims to demoralize their opponents. The Council ships responded according to doctrine, forming defensive formations and charging their shields. The humans, however, did something unprecedented. They accelerated directly toward the Kethmori force. "This is suicide," breathed Lieutenant Koresh, as tactical displays showed the human ships rushing headlong into what should have been certain death. They're outnumbered 3 to 1. And those dreadnoughts are designed to take apart entire fleets. But Admiral Vexthul was beginning to understand that human tactical thinking operated on principles entirely foreign to galactic military science. As he watched, the human ships began to separate, each one taking a wildly different approach vector. One dove below the galactic plane, another climbed above it, while a third began a spiraling approach that defied conventional physics. The lead human ship, Captain Chen's command vessel, did something that made every alien observer question their understanding of space combat. It stopped accelerating and went completely dark, disappearing from sensors as if it had never existed. Where did they go? Admiral Vexthul demanded of his sensor operators. "Unknown, sir. They just vanished." The Kethmori force, equally confused by the humans' unconventional approach, opened fire with their massive plasma cannon arrays. Streams of energy that could melt through the hulls of most ships lanced through space. But the human vessels weren't where the targeting computers expected them to be. What happened next redefined Admiral Vexthul's understanding of warfare. The human ship that had been diving below the galactic plane suddenly reappeared directly underneath the lead Kethmori dreadnought. Without warning, it fired a weapon that Admiral Vexthul didn't even recognize. A brilliant beam of focused energy punched through the dreadnought's shields as if they didn't exist, tore through the hull and emerged from the top of the massive ship. The Kethmori dreadnought, a vessel that had destroyed countless worlds, simply fell apart. Not exploded, not damaged, but literally came apart as if the forces holding its atoms together had been cancelled. "What type of weapon was that?" Admiral Vexthul whispered. "Unknown energy signature, sir," his weapons officer replied with barely controlled panic. "Our computers can't even classify the emission spectrum." But the humans weren't finished. The second ship, the one that had climbed above the galactic plane, had somehow positioned itself directly behind the Kethmori escort formation. It fired what appeared to be simple projectile weapons, but the projectiles moved at velocities approaching light speed and seemed to guide themselves through impossible course corrections. Each projectile struck a different escort vessel, and each impact resulted in complete destruction. Not just hull breaches or system failures, but total annihilation. In less than 30 seconds, 12 Kethmori ships simply ceased to exist. The remaining 2 dreadnoughts tried to retreat, but Captain Chen's ship reappeared directly in their path. The Admiral realized with growing amazement that the humans had somehow predicted exactly where the Kethmori would try to flee, and had been waiting for them. Kethmori vessels, Chen's voice broadcast on all frequencies, calm and professional as if she were ordering coffee, rather than facing down ships that had terrorized the galaxy. You have 30 seconds to surrender or be destroyed. This is your only warning, the response came as expected. The Kethmori, who had never surrendered to anyone, opened fire with everything they had. Admiral Vexthul watched in fascination as Captain Chen's ship simply wasn't there when the energy beams arrived, reappearing an instant later in a completely different position. How are they moving like that? Lieutenant Koresh asked, but Admiral Vexthul was beginning to understand. The humans weren't using conventional propulsion. They were using technology that treated space itself as a medium to be manipulated. They weren't moving through space. They were making space move around them. The final exchange lasted less than a minute. The human ships surrounded the 2 remaining Kethmori dreadnoughts and fired simultaneously, but they weren't using the same weapons they had used before. This time, the energy signatures were completely different, as if each human ship carried multiple types of impossible weapons. The Kethmori ships didn't explode. They didn't fall apart. They simply stopped. Every light went out, every energy emission ceased, every system shut down simultaneously. They hung in space like dead hulks, completely powerless. Are they destroyed? Admiral Vexthul asked. Negative, sir, his sensor operator replied with confusion. They're intact but completely inert. No life signs, no energy readings, nothing. It's as if they just turned off. Captain Chen's voice came through the communication system. Admiral, the Kethmori crews are alive but unconscious. We've developed weapons specifically designed to disable rather than destroy when we need to gather intelligence. The implications hit Admiral Vexthul like a physical blow. The humans had weapons that could kill anything they chose to kill, and weapons that could capture anything they chose to capture. They had defeated a force that had been unstoppable for 15 years, and they had done it in less than 10 minutes. Captain, the Admiral transmitted, his voice barely steady. How many different types of weapons do your ships carry? There was a pause before Chen responded, and when she did, Admiral Vexthul detected something that might have been sympathy in her voice. Admiral, human military doctrine assumes that any engagement might require solutions ranging from complete annihilation to surgical precision. Our ships carry 47 different weapons systems, each designed for specific tactical situations. What you just witnessed was a fairly routine skirmish by our standards. Routine. Admiral Vexthul stared at the tactical display showing the remains of what had been an unstoppable Kethmori force, and realized that the humans considered this level of devastation routine. Captain, in 15 years of war, no force has ever defeated a Kethmori attack group without significant casualties. You eliminated them without taking a single hit. That's because you've been fighting them like civilized beings fighting other civilized beings, Chen replied. We're fighting them like predators hunting prey. There's a significant difference in approach. As the human ships began collecting the disabled Kethmori vessels for intelligence gathering, Admiral Vexthul found himself asking a question that would haunt his dreams for years to come. Captain Chen, if this was routine for you, what would you consider a serious engagement? The pause before her answer was longer this time, and when she spoke, there was something in her voice that made Admiral Vexthul understand why the galaxy had never produced a species like humanity. Admiral, you really don't want to find out. The interrogation of the captured Kethmori revealed intelligence that shook the foundations of everything the galaxy thought it knew about the threat they faced. Deep within the secure facilities of the Council's most classified research station, xenolinguist Dr. Yalthina worked alongside human intelligence, Officer Commander Torres, to decode the prisoners' communications. What they discovered was far worse than anyone had imagined. The translations are confirmed. Dr. Yalthina reported to the assembled command staff, her tentacles writhing with nervous energy. The Kethmori we've been fighting aren't invaders. They're refugees. The silence in the briefing room was deafening. Admiral Vexthul felt his breathing apparatus malfunction for a moment, before automatically correcting itself. That's impossible. Refugees don't systematically annihilate entire civilizations. Commander Torres stepped forward, his expression grim even by human standards. Admiral, the Kethmori are fleeing from something they call the Great Hunger. According to their communications, they've been running for over 50 years, destroying everything behind them to prevent this entity from following their trail. Captain Chen, who had been studying the translation data, looked up with an expression that Admiral Vexthul had learned to associate with very bad news. Commander, show them the deep scan results from the Kethmori ships. The holographic display activated, showing the internal structure of the captured vessels. What the aliens saw defied their understanding of physics. The ships weren't just built. They were grown. Organic and mechanical components were fused together in ways that suggested biotechnology far beyond anything the galaxy had achieved. The Kethmori haven't just been traveling through space, Commander Torres explained. They've been evolving. Each ship contains genetic samples from hundreds of species they've encountered. They're not just destroying civilizations. They're incorporating their biological advantages into their own genome. Dr. Yalthina pulled up another display showing genetic analysis. Every Kethmori we've examined contains DNA from at least 40 different species. They're not naturally this powerful. They've been making themselves stronger by absorbing the traits of everything they've destroyed. Admiral Vexthul felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental controls. If they're running from something and they've been absorbing the strengths of dozens of species for 50 years, what could possibly be powerful enough to make them flee? Captain Chen activated the long-range sensors, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. A region of space approximately 20 light-years across was highlighted in ominous red. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected massive gravitational anomalies in the outer dark, beyond the galactic rim. The energy signatures suggest something that defies current understanding of physics, something big enough to bend space-time around its presence. The map zoomed in on the anomalous region, and what they saw made every being in the room understand that their problems had just become infinitely worse. Space itself was being consumed, leaving behind absolutely nothing. Not debris, not radiation, not even the background energy that filled empty space. Whatever was out there was eating reality itself. The Great Hunger, Dr. Yalthina whispered. The Kethmori communications mentioned that it consumes everything. Not just matter and energy, but the very fabric of existence. It leaves behind nothing. Commander Torres brought up the tactical analysis. Our preliminary calculations suggest that this entity is moving through space at approximately 1 light-year per month, consuming everything in its path. At that rate, it will reach the galactic core in approximately 800 years. 800 years? Admiral Vexthul said with relief. That gives us time to prepare, to evacuate, to find a solution. Captain Chen's expression grew even grimmer. Admiral, that calculation assumes it maintains its current velocity. According to Kethmori intelligence, it's been accelerating. Each system it consumes makes it faster and larger. Their projections suggest it will reach the outer galactic territories in less than 50 years. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. The galaxy wasn't just facing an invasion. It was facing complete annihilation by something that consumed the very foundations of reality. There's more, Dr. Yalthina continued, her voice barely audible. The Kethmori believe that conventional matter and energy actually feed this entity. Every star system it encounters makes it stronger. Traditional weapons, energy shields, even nuclear explosions just provide it with more material to absorb. Admiral Vexthul looked around the room at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Every face showed the same expression of helpless terror. They were facing an enemy that couldn't be fought with any weapon they understood, couldn't be negotiated with, and couldn't be stopped. What about evacuation beyond the galactic rim? Asked Council Leader Thrixania through the communication link. Captain Chen shook her head. According to the Kethmori data, they tried that. The Great Hunger followed them. It seems to be attracted to large concentrations of organized matter. Fleeing just delays the inevitable. Commander Torres activated another display showing human deep space installations. However, our analysis suggests that the entity has certain limitations. It appears to require a minimum density of matter to maintain cohesion. Completely empty space seems to confuse its navigation systems. Are you suggesting we evacuate to empty space? Admiral Vexthul asked. No, Captain Chen replied. I'm suggesting we create empty space. She stood and walked to the tactical display, pointing to several star systems along the projected path of the Great Hunger. Human military doctrine includes contingency plans for scorched earth tactics on a galactic scale. We have weapons capable of completely sterilizing star systems, removing every trace of matter and energy. The room erupted in shocked protests from the alien delegates. The idea of deliberately destroying star systems was beyond anything they had ever considered. You're talking about genocide on an unprecedented scale, Council Leader Thrixania said, her harmonic resonance filled with horror. I'm talking about survival, Captain Chen replied calmly. The Kethmori tried to run, tried to hide, tried to fight. None of it worked. The only strategy they didn't try was denying the entity the resources it needs to continue existing. Commander Torres brought up detailed tactical projections. By creating a belt of completely empty space along the entity's projected path, we might be able to trap it in a region where it can't maintain coherence. It's essentially a siege strategy on a galactic scale. Admiral Vexthul studied the projections with growing amazement and terror. The humans weren't just proposing to fight an impossible enemy. They were proposing to reshape the galaxy itself to create a trap. The scale of thinking involved was beyond anything he had ever encountered. Captain, even if this strategy could work, the resources required would be astronomical. You're talking about evacuating and then destroying hundreds of star systems. The logistics alone are within human capabilities, Captain Chen interrupted. Admiral, you're still thinking like a peaceful civilization trying to preserve as much as possible. We're thinking like a species that understands that sometimes you have to destroy everything to save anything. Dr. Yalthina looked up from her analysis tablets. Captain, there's something else. The Kethmori communications mention that the Great Hunger shows certain behavioral patterns. It seems to avoid regions of space with specific energy signatures. They never discovered what those signatures were, but they noted that some empty sectors of space remained untouched, even when the entity passed nearby. Captain, Chen and Commander Torres exchanged a look that Admiral Vexthul was beginning to recognize as humans sharing information without speaking. Commander, initiate deep analysis of those sectors. Cross-reference with our dark matter research. Already in progress, Captain. Initial results suggest the untouched regions contain high concentrations of what our scientists call aggressive vacuum regions, where space itself has been modified to resist the presence of matter, Admiral. Vexthul felt a spark of hope for the first time since learning about the Great Hunger. You mean there might be a way to create regions of space that this entity cannot consume? Possibly, Captain Chen said, but it would require technology that pushes the boundaries of what's theoretically possible. We'd essentially be weaponizing empty space itself. As the briefing continued, Admiral Vexthul realized that the humans weren't just offering to help fight an impossible enemy. They were proposing to fundamentally alter the nature of galactic warfare, galactic strategy, and possibly the galaxy itself. The question was, were they humanity's salvation, or had the galaxy simply traded one impossible threat for another? The first test of human vacuum warfare technology took place in the abandoned Kepler 442 system, where 3 dead worlds orbited a dying red giant star. Admiral Vexthul observed from a safe distance of 50 light-years, using long-range sensors that had been specifically calibrated to detect the impossible energy signatures that human weapons produced. Captain Chen had assembled a task force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 12 human ships, each one carrying weapons that the Council's best scientists insisted could not exist, prepared to demonstrate humanity's solution to fighting an enemy that consumed reality itself. Admiral, Captain Chen's voice crackled across the communication array. We're beginning the vacuum initialization sequence. I recommend your ships maintain current distance until the process is complete. Admiral Vexthul studied his sensor readings with growing unease. The human ships were generating energy signatures that were off the scale of anything his instruments could measure. More disturbing, space around them appeared to be changing in ways that defied physics. Captain, he transmitted, our sensors are detecting massive gravitational fluctuations around your position. Are your ships safe? Perfectly safe, Admiral. What you're seeing is the preliminary stage of aggressive vacuum generation. We're essentially teaching empty space to be hostile to the presence of matter. Dr. Yalthina, observing from the science station, looked up from her instruments with an expression of scientific fascination mixed with terror. "Admiral, the humans aren't just manipulating space-time. They're rewriting the fundamental laws of physics in localized regions." The process began slowly. The human ships arranged themselves in a complex three-dimensional formation around the target system, each vessel focusing its weapons on specific coordinates in apparently empty space. But as Admiral Vexthul watched, those regions of empty space began to change. The first indication was the stars themselves. The dying red giant at the system's center began to flicker, its light distorting as if being viewed through water. Then the planets started to behave strangely, their orbital patterns shifting as the gravitational constants around them fluctuated. "What are they doing to that system?" Lieutenant Koresh asked with barely controlled panic. Commander Torres's voice joined the communication channel from the human flagship. "We're installing what you might call reality anchors throughout the system. Think of them as immune system antibodies. But instead of fighting infections, they fight anything that tries to alter the fundamental structure of spacetime." Admiral Vexthul watched in amazement as the human weapons continued their impossible work. Beams of energy that registered as negative mass on his sensors struck precise points in space, creating distortions that spread outward like ripples in a pond. But these ripples were in the fabric of reality itself. "The process requires precise coordination," Captain Chen explained as her ships continued their work. "We're essentially creating a network of space-time modifications that will automatically resist any attempt to consume or alter the local physics. It's like installing security software in the universe's operating system." The transformation became visible as the human weapons reached full power. The space around the Kepler 442 system began to take on a subtle luminescence, as if the vacuum itself was glowing with internal energy. Stars viewed through this modified space appeared distorted, their light taking on properties that violated everything the Council knew about electromagnetic radiation. "Captain," Dr. Yalthina called out, her scientific instruments struggling to process the data they were receiving. "The energy patterns you're creating are theoretically impossible. According to our understanding of physics, that much negative energy should create paradoxes that collapse local spacetime." "Doctor, your understanding of physics is based on observations of naturally occurring phenomena," Commander Torres replied. "Humans have been artificially manipulating physics for over 2 centuries. We've learned that the universe is much more flexible than most species realize." The final stage of the process was the most dramatic. All 12 human ships fired simultaneously, their combined energy focused on the system's star. For a moment, the red giant blazed with impossible brightness, its light shifting through spectrums that had no names in galactic science. Then something extraordinary happened. The star didn't explode or collapse. Instead, it simply stopped. Its nuclear fusion ceased, its gravitational field stabilized, and its light became perfectly steady. It had been transformed into something that was no longer quite a star, but wasn't dead either. "System conversion complete," Captain Chen reported matter-of-factly. "Kepler 442 is now a region of aggressive vacuum.
Any entity attempting to consume matter or energy within this space will find the local physics actively resistant to such activities." Admiral Vexthul stared at his sensor readings in disbelief.
The human ships had transformed an entire star system into something that didn't quite exist in normal space-time. The energy signatures coming from the modified region suggested that it existed in a state of permanent hostility to any outside influence. "Captain, how do we test whether this will actually work against the Great Hunger?" "We don't have to wait, Admiral. Look at your long-range sensors." Admiral Vexthul switched his displays to maximum range, focusing on the region beyond the galactic rim where the Great Hunger was slowly consuming its way toward civilization. What he saw made his breathing apparatus skip several cycles. The entity had changed course. Instead of continuing its steady approach toward the galactic core, the Great Hunger had curved away from the Kepler 442 system, taking a path that would add years to its journey. It was actively avoiding the region of modified space that the humans had created. "It's working," he whispered. "The entity is actually avoiding the modified space." "Better than that," Commander Torres added, checking his own instruments. "Our deep space monitoring stations show that it's not just avoiding the system. It's showing signs of confusion. The aggressive vacuum is interfering with whatever navigation systems it uses." Dr. Yaltina looked up from her analysis with an expression of dawning understanding. Captain, if we could create enough of these modified regions, could we actually corral this entity? Force it into a specific path? That's exactly what we're proposing, Captain Chen replied. But it would require cooperation on a scale that the galaxy has never attempted. We'd need to modify hundreds of star systems, evacuate millions of worlds, and coordinate resources from every species in the Council. Admiral Vexthul felt hope and terror warring in his chest. The humans had demonstrated that the Great Hunger could be influenced, possibly even controlled, but the cost would be staggering. Captain, you're talking about reshaping significant portions of the galaxy. The resources alone are available, Captain Chen interrupted. Admiral, this is what humans do. When faced with an existential threat, we don't look for the minimum response that might work. We implement the maximum response that ensures success. She paused, and when she continued, there was something in her voice that reminded Admiral Vexthul why he found humans so unsettling. The question isn't whether we can do this. The question is whether your species are willing to sacrifice everything you've built to save everything you are. Commander Torres brought up a galactic map showing the proposed modifications. Hundreds of star systems marked for transformation, millions of worlds that would need to be evacuated, entire sectors of space that would be fundamentally altered. The timeline is tight but manageable, Torres explained. We estimate 18 months to complete the primary barrier, assuming full cooperation from all Council species. The secondary containment network would take another 6 months. And if some species refuse to cooperate? Admiral Vexthul asked, though he already knew the answer. Captain Chen's response was delivered with the same calm professionalism she used for everything else. But Admiral Vexthul heard the underlying steel. Admiral, we've learned that when survival is at stake, cooperation isn't really optional. Those who won't help build the solution become part of the problem, and we're very good at solving problems. As the human ships began their journey back to Council space, Admiral Vexthul realized that the galaxy was about to change in ways that no one could predict. The humans had offered salvation, but salvation that came at the cost of everything familiar. The question now was whether galactic civilization could survive being saved by humanity. The resistance began 3 weeks after the Council voted to implement the human containment strategy. Admiral Vexthul first learned about it when his intelligence chief, Commander Rilnash, burst into his quarters with a security alert that made his blood freeze. Sir, we have a problem. The Zenthari Collective has declared the humans a greater threat than the Great Hunger and is actively sabotaging evacuation efforts. Admiral Vexthul felt his heart sink. The Zenthari were one of the galaxy's most advanced military powers, with a fleet second only to the Council's combined forces. If they had turned against the human alliance, the entire containment strategy was in jeopardy. What's their reasoning? He asked, though he suspected he already knew. They're calling it the human solution problem, Commander Rilnash replied, activating a holographic display showing intercepted Zenthari communications. Their analysts have concluded that any species capable of rewriting physics on a galactic scale poses an unacceptable, long-term threat to galactic sovereignty. The display showed detailed intelligence reports on human capabilities, and Admiral Vexthul realized with growing alarm that the Zenthari had been studying humanity far more thoroughly than anyone had realized. They had identified human weapon systems that even the Council hadn't known existed, analyzed human military doctrine with frightening accuracy, and reached conclusions that made Admiral Vexthul's blood run cold. Sir, Commander Rilnash continued, their projections suggest that once the Great Hunger is contained, humans will possess technology and strategic positioning that makes them effectively the galaxy's dominant power. They're arguing that we're trading one extinction threat for another. Admiral Vexthul studied the intelligence reports with growing unease. The Zenthari analysis wasn't wrong. Human technology was advancing at a rate that defied understanding. Their military capabilities were beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen, and their strategic thinking operated on scales that made traditional galactic politics seem primitive. Have they made any direct moves against human forces? Not yet, but they've begun positioning their fleet along human supply routes. Our intelligence suggests they're preparing to interdict the evacuation fleets and prevent the humans from accessing the systems marked for conversion. Admiral Vexthul activated his command console and pulled up the current galactic situation. The evacuation efforts were proceeding ahead of schedule, with human ships providing escort and logistical support, that made the massive population transfers possible. But if the Zenthari interfered, millions of beings would be trapped in systems marked for aggressive vacuum conversion. "Get me Captain Chen immediately," he ordered. The connection established within minutes, and Captain Chen's image appeared on the main display. She was standing on what appeared to be the bridge of a ship Admiral Vex Thule didn't recognize, surrounded by displays showing star charts and tactical information. "Admiral," Chen said without preamble, "I assume you're calling about the Zenthari situation. We've been monitoring their fleet movements. Captain, if they attack the evacuation convoys or attempt to prevent the system conversions, the entire strategy collapses. Can human forces protect the operation?" Captain Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes made Admiral Vex Thule remember that he was dealing with representatives of a species that had never lost a war. "Admiral, the Zenthari are about to learn the difference between being a galactic military power and being a species that has weaponized evolution itself. But I need to ask you something first." She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried a weight that made Admiral Vex Thule understand that this was a moment that would define the future of galactic civilization. "Do you want us to remove the Zenthari threat permanently, or do you want us to educate them about why cooperation is in their best interests?" The casual way she discussed removing one of the galaxy's most powerful military forces made Admiral Vex Thule realized that the Zenthari might not be wrong about the long-term implications of human power. "Captain, surely there's a middle option. Some form of negotiation or compromise." "Admiral, the Zenthari have already made their choice. They've decided that humanity represents an unacceptable threat and are preparing to use military force to prevent us from saving the galaxy. In human military doctrine, that makes them enemy combatants." Commander Torres appeared on screen beside Captain Chen, carrying what appeared to be tactical analysis reports. "Admiral, our intelligence suggests the Zenthari are planning a three-pronged attack. They'll strike evacuation convoys in the Outer Rim, sabotage human supply lines, and attempt to destroy our vacuum generation equipment." Admiral Vex Thule felt the weight of command settling heavily on his shoulders. He was being asked to choose between allowing the Zenthari to potentially doom the galaxy or giving humans permission to demonstrate just how dangerous they really were. "Captain, if you engage the Zenthari fleet, what are the likely casualties?" "That depends entirely on how quickly they realize their mistake and surrender," Captain Chen replied. "Human warfare doctrine prioritizes rapid resolution of conflicts. The longer an enemy resists, the more comprehensive our response becomes." Commander Torres activated additional displays showing human fleet dispositions. "Admiral, we currently have 47 ships within striking distance of the Zenthari fleet. Each ship carries weapon systems specifically designed for engaging multiple targets simultaneously." 47 ships against the entire Zenthari fleet? Admiral Vex Thule asked in disbelief. "They have over 300 warships." "Yes, sir," Commander Torres replied matter-of-factly. "We consider those odds acceptable." Admiral Vex Thule stared at the tactical displays, trying to understand how any military force could consider such overwhelming numerical disadvantage as acceptable odds. Then he remembered the casual way human ships had eliminated the Kethmori forces, and began to understand that human mathematics of warfare operated on principles entirely different from galactic norms. "Captain Chen, what exactly are you proposing?" "We're proposing to resolve this situation in the most efficient manner possible," Chen replied. "The Zenthari have positioned their fleet in a standard defensive formation, designed to intimidate opponents and demonstrate their power. They're thinking like a traditional galactic military force. And you're thinking like humans," Admiral Vex Thule said, beginning to understand. "Exactly. We're thinking like a species that has spent its entire evolutionary history learning to defeat enemies that outnumber, outgun, and outsize us. The Zenthari fleet is impressive by galactic standards, but by human standards, it's a target-rich environment." Commander Torres brought up detailed tactical projections. "Admiral, human engagement doctrine calls for what we term overwhelming educational experiences. The goal is to demonstrate the futility of resistance so thoroughly that future conflicts become unnecessary." Admiral Vex Thule felt a chill as he realized what the humans were really offering. They weren't just proposing to defeat the Zenthari fleet. They were proposing to do it so decisively that no other species would ever consider challenging human operations again. "Captain, I need your honest assessment," If you engage the Zenthari, will it be warfare or demonstration? Captain Chen's expression softened slightly, and for a moment, Admiral Vexthul glimpsed something almost like sympathy. Admiral, from the human perspective, there's no difference. Every war we fight is a demonstration to future potential enemies about the costs of threatening human interests. The galaxy is about to receive a very clear message about why cooperation with humanity is the only rational choice. As Admiral Vexthul considered his options, he realized that the galaxy was balanced on a knife's edge. The Zenthari represented the old order, the traditional balance of power that had governed galactic politics for millennia. The humans represented something new, something that operated by rules that made traditional politics irrelevant. Captain, proceed with whatever action you deem necessary to protect the evacuation operations and ensure the success of the containment strategy. Understood, Admiral. We'll resolve this situation within the next 48 hours. As the transmission ended, Admiral Vexthul found himself wondering whether he had just authorized the salvation of galactic civilization or its fundamental transformation into something unrecognizable. The answer would come sooner than he expected. The Battle of the Zenthari Expanse lasted exactly 14 minutes and 37 seconds. Admiral Vexthul observed the engagement from the safety of the Council flagship, his sensors recording every moment of what would become known as the day galactic warfare changed forever. The Zenthari Collective had assembled their full battle fleet in the Nexus Corridor, blocking the primary evacuation route with over 300 warships arranged in their traditional fortress formation. Their massive dreadnoughts formed the center, surrounded by layers of cruisers, destroyers, and fighter squadrons. It was a formation that had dominated galactic conflicts for over 2 centuries. Captain Chen's response demonstrated why human military doctrine had never lost a. Where 47 human ships approached the Zenthari formation from 7 different vectors, each group using approach patterns that defied conventional tactical analysis. Some ships appeared to be moving through dimensions that didn't exist on standard sensors, while others seemed to be existing in multiple locations simultaneously. Admiral, Lieutenant Koresh reported with barely controlled panic, the human ships are using technologies our sensors can't properly track. They're generating energy, signatures that suggest they're manipulating space-time. At the quantum level, Admiral Vexthul watched in fascination as the human fleet demonstrated capabilities that redefined his understanding of space combat. The lead group of ships simply phased through the Zenthari outer perimeter, ignoring shields and defensive positions as if they didn't exist. When the Zenthari opened fire, their weapons struck empty space while the human ships reappeared in positions that should have been impossible. The first phase of the engagement established human tactical superiority. Instead of engaging the Zenthari fleet directly, the human ships began deploying what Captain Chen called reality modification bombs throughout the combat zone. These devices created localized areas where the laws of physics operated according to human specifications rather than universal constants. What are they doing? Admiral Vexthul demanded of his science officer. Dr. Yalthina, monitoring the engagement from multiple sensor arrays, looked up with an expression of scientific amazement mixed with terror. Admiral, the humans are rewriting the fundamental forces of nature within the battle zone. They're essentially creating a pocket universe where their weapons work perfectly, and Zenthari weapons become ineffective. The transformation became visible as the reality modification fields expanded. Zenthari energy weapons began firing beams that curved away from their targets. Their missiles suddenly found themselves unable to maintain course, and their shields started protecting human ships instead of their own vessels. Fleet Commander Kazthor of the Zenthari Collective transmitted on all frequencies, his voice filled with the kind of panic that Admiral Vexthul had never heard from a senior military officer. What kind of weapons are these? Our targeting computers are registering impossible readings. Our shields are reporting they're protecting the wrong ships. Captain Chen's response was delivered with the same calm professionalism she used for everything else. But Admiral Vexthul detected something that might have been educational intent. Commander Kazthor, you're experiencing what humans call asymmetrical warfare. You've been fighting according to the rules of galactic military engagement. We don't recognize those rules. The second phase demonstrated human precision. Instead of destroying Zenthari ships, The human fleet began systematically disabling them using weapons that targeted specific systems with impossible accuracy. Engines shut down without damage, weapons systems simply stopped functioning, and life support remained intact while all military capabilities vanished. "They're not trying to kill us," Commander Casthor transmitted with growing confusion. "They're just turning us off." "Correct," Captain Chen replied. "Human doctrine distinguishes between eliminating threats and eliminating people. You've chosen to become a threat to galactic survival. We're removing your ability to continue that choice without removing your ability to make better choices in the future." Admiral Vexthul watched in amazement as the entire Zenthari fleet, one of the most powerful military forces in galactic history, was systematically and methodically disabled by a human force that was outnumbered 7-1. But the humans weren't just winning. They were providing a comprehensive demonstration of technological superiority that made resistance seem pointless. The third and final phase of the engagement redefined Admiral Vexthul's understanding of human capabilities. Instead of leaving the Zenthari ships floating helplessly in space, the human fleet began what Captain Chen called technological integration. Beams of energy connected human ships to disabled Zenthari vessels, and Admiral Vexthul watched in fascination as the alien ships began to change. Their hulls reconfigured, their systems upgraded, their weapons replaced with technology that his sensors couldn't identify. "Captain Chen," Admiral Vexthul transmitted, "what are you doing to their ships?" "We're updating them to human technological standards," Chen replied as if this were the most natural thing in the universe. "The Zenthari chose to oppose us based on fear of human technological superiority. We're removing their reason for fear by making them our technological equals." Commander Torres appeared on the communication channel, monitoring the integration process. "Admiral, we're upgrading Zenthari ships with human defensive systems, human faster-than-light technology, and human weapon systems. When we're finished, they'll be capable of fighting alongside us against the Great Hunger, instead of against us over political differences." Admiral Vexthul felt his understanding of human psychology shift fundamentally. They hadn't just defeated the Zenthari fleet. They had absorbed it. Instead of destroying their enemies, they had converted them into allies by removing the technological disadvantages that had made them enemies in the first place. Fleet Commander Kazathor's voice came through the communication array, but it carried a different tone than before. Wonder replaced panic. Curiosity replaced fear. "Captain Chen, our ships are reporting capabilities we never imagined possible. Our engines are operating at efficiency levels that should violate thermodynamic laws. Our weapons are generating energy from sources we don't understand. Welcome to human-level technology," Captain Chen replied. "Commander, your ships are now capable of surviving in aggressive vacuum zones, fighting entities that manipulate reality, and operating in environments that would have destroyed them an hour ago. The question is, do you want to use these capabilities to continue opposing galactic survival, or do you want to help us save everyone?" The response came immediately, and Admiral Vexthul heard something in Commander Casthor's voice that he had never expected to hear from a Zenthari military officer. Gratitude. "Captain, the Zenthari Collective formally requests integration into the Human-led Defense Alliance. We had no idea what you were really offering the galaxy." Over the following weeks, Admiral Vexthul observed the transformation of galactic civilization as human technology and methodology spread throughout Council space. Species that had opposed human leadership found themselves uplifted to capabilities they had never imagined. Military forces that had feared human domination discovered they were being invited to participate in humanity's vision of galactic defense. The evacuation operations accelerated beyond all projections as human upgraded. Ships operated with efficiency that made the impossible routine. Star systems were converted to aggressive vacuum zones ahead of schedule, creating a containment network that forced the Great Hunger into predictable paths. But the most significant change was in the nature of galactic civilization itself. The old politics of competing powers and territorial disputes became irrelevant when every species possessed human-level technology. Instead of fighting over resources, they were working together to reshape the galaxy into something that could survive existential threats. 6 months after the Battle of the Zenthari Expanse, Admiral Vexthul stood on the observation deck of his flagship, watching the first test of the completed containment network. The Great Hunger, moving inexorably toward the galactic core, encountered the web of aggressive vacuum zones and reality anchors that humanity had helped create. For the first time in over 50 years, the entity stopped. Confused by the hostile physics surrounding it, unable to consume the modified spacetime, it hung motionless at the edge of the containment zone. Containment successful, Captain Chen reported from her command ship. The Great Hunger is trapped in a region of space where it cannot feed, cannot grow, and cannot escape. It will remain there until we decide what to do with it. Admiral Vexthul realized that the galaxy had been saved, but salvation had come at the cost of everything familiar. Humanity had kept its promise to protect galactic civilization, but in the process, they had fundamentally transformed what galactic civilization meant. The species that had once trembled before Deathworlders now stood as equals with the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. They had been saved by humanity, but more importantly, they had been invited to become something greater than they had ever imagined possible. As Admiral Vexthul watched human ships and their upgraded alien allies patrolling the containment zone, he